hell are you looking at? You better run faster than that. You gotta be careful this time of year. There's all kinds of dangers lurking off of this path. What the hell is that? The lesson is never get off the path. Hi, it's Mark from An America in Russia. Today I'm going to continue on with my Growing Up in America During the Cold War series. Today I'm going to talk about the assassination of President Kennedy, since that's on the news with all the records being released now. Well, I think that the assassination of President Kennedy was one of those moments, I think, where people remember just where they were and what they were doing when they first heard this news. Now, I don't remember, but I was only 6 years old, so it wasn't something that I had really registered in my mind at the time. However, it did serve up some memories for me and form part of my childhood growing up in Cold War America, part of my background. You may find it interesting to see how this important event was perceived in the mind of a 6-year-old at the time. So don't expect some well-written account of the JFK assassination. I'm just reporting how a 6-year-old perceived it when it happened. On November 22nd, 1963, well, that was the day that JFK was assassinated, I was in first grade, and I recall the following. Well, JFK was shot at about 12:30 p.m. I don't really remember the time looking back, but I know it happened while I was in school. It was on a Friday. Now, I had a young female teacher named Miss Brody, and like many of the other boys in the class, I think I had a little crush on her. When she heard the news, she started crying, though we didn't know why she was crying. Well, she told us. And then she said, "I know that we're not supposed to pray in school." You see, the very same year, 1963, there was a Supreme Court decision which no longer allowed prayer in public schools. But she said, "The president has just been shot, and I think we should pray that he lives." Well, we said a prayer, though I have no real memory of exactly what the prayer was. Shortly after that, we learned that President Kennedy had died. And I was sad because I saw that I should be. I mean, all of the adults I encountered were very sad. And life as I knew it back then kind of stopped, and people were glued to their TVs or radios. Well, I guess I do know where I was and what I was doing when it happened. There you go, a little recall of memory. Now, John Kennedy was Irish Catholic. Actually, the very first Irish Catholic ever elected president of the United States. He was actually asked during his debates, or maybe it was during an interview, he was asked what he would honor if there was a conflict, the U.S. Constitution or the Pope. Well, of course, he said the U.S. Constitution, but really, this question was asked, and it was a big question, apparently, on many people's minds. You see, less than 100 years before that, there were millions of Irish Catholics immigrating into America due to famine in Ireland. Now, to that point, with founding fathers, everything else, none of these people were Catholic. They're all Protestants. These Protestants didn't really like to see the Catholics coming in because they left Europe due to Catholic Church, really. Well, the Irish came in, but they were hated. They were despised. But they multiplied like rabbits. And now one was the president. My family was Scots-Irish Catholic, and Kennedy's photo hung in my house just on one of the walls. Now, just a small fact. At that time, nearly 60% of all Americans had some Irish blood. Like I said, they multiplied like rabbits. Now, I seem to recall that schools were closed until after the president's funeral. and most people stayed home from work during this time. TVs all over America were constantly on, so were radios during this time. The funeral of JFK was scheduled for November 25th. Well, on the 24th of November, I was watching TV with my father. The Dallas Police Department was preparing to transfer Lee Harvey Oswald, the man believed to have shot JFK. They were planning to transfer him from the Dallas jail to be transported to the Dallas courthouse in a police van for his initial hearing. Well, I wanted to see what this guy looked like. Anyhow, as the police were transferring him from the jail to get into a police van that would transport him to the courthouse, some guy ran up to him and shot him. I mean, he shot him live on TV. And this was a first. And I did see this. It was very quick. And right after it happened, the police surrounded everything. And you could no longer see anything. But I did see Jack Ruby shoot and kill Lee Harvey Oswald. I saw it live on TV. I was actually surprised that my father didn't give me the bum's rush, get me out of the room, but he didn't. I guess he figured that I should see some of this history unfolding, or perhaps he was just in shock himself. Now, unlike when President Kennedy was shot, there were no tears shed when Lee Harvey Oswald was shot. I think most people were happy, although the thought of conspiracy started to form in many people's minds from that very moment. On November 25th, the TV was on all the time. That day would be the funeral and burial of President Kennedy. This was something very unique for a 6-year-old to be watching this, because almost no American parent would ever even think of bringing a 6-year-old to see a funeral. But this was the President of the United States, and it was all full of pomp and circumstance. It was history. I remember the flag-draped coffin lying on a horse-drawn type of cart. I remember the following well. As the casket passed by the President's wife and his 2 young children, his little son, John Jr., just 3 years old at the time, saluted his father's coffin as it passed him. This profoundly struck me, more than perhaps any other action during that time. First, how hard it must have been for him to salute the coffin, and then wondering if he even understood what was happening at that point. I mean, he just turned 3 years old. Lastly, unable to fully comprehend how he felt as I was thinking about how I could handle this situation if it were my dad.
From St. Matthew's, the cortege is to cross the Potomac to the Cemetery of Heroes, Arlington. As the casket is returned to the caisson, there comes a family vignette that must take its place with those memories we hold warm and dear. A gentle reminder from his mother, and John celebrates his 3rd birthday with a soldier's farewell to his father.
Only a few more things that I can remember about that whole situation. When they were about to lower President Kennedy's coffin into his grave, I saw my first 21-gun salute. What I learned, though, was that there were only 7 guns, but they each fired 3 times. As my recently learned multiplication table showed, 7 times 3 equals 21. It was a solemn day, full of pomp and pageantry. Now, Lyndon Johnson, the new president, was sworn in as president on his airplane as he was rushing to return to Washington. This was on the 24th of November, as soon as JFK was pronounced dead. When I saw him on TV, Lyndon Johnson, I thought that he didn't looked very honest. Certainly not like President Kennedy. This guy looked a little bit like a gangster. Yeah, I guess that even at 6 years of age, I was still quite perceptive. 3 other times in my life did I see attempted assassination on presidents. I saw Lynette Squeaky Fromme, who was a Charles Manson disciple, try to kill President Ford with a shotgun.
Good evening. In California today, President Ford looked down the barrel of a loaded automatic held by a red-haired woman in a long red dress. But the gun didn't go off, and he's all right. The woman was wrestled to the ground by a Secret Service man, and the president was hustled away. She is being charged with attempted murder of the president. She is 26-year-old Lynette Alice Fromme, nicknamed Squeaky. She's a member of the so-called Manson family, followers of the convicted murderer, Charles Manson.
I saw John Hinckley Jr. attempt to kill President Reagan. I mean, he shot him and he injured him very badly. And only recently, I forget the idiot's name, but I saw the man who tried to kill President Trump. Now, of course, this was while Trump was still campaigning and he wasn't yet president the second time, but he was still a president. When I say that I saw these events, I mean after the fact on the internet. Well, just a few days ago, President Trump had all of the final secret documents released concerning the assassination of JFK. He released them completely unredacted. So after 60 years of conspiracy theories concerning who killed JFK, I suppose we'll finally have all of the answers. Now there's about 88,000 pages of documents, so it may take a couple of weeks. I don't have the answers or even a theory. All I know is that he was assassinated and that this was part of my, really what kind of formed me as a individual, because it was part of my early life during my developmental years. Well, I guess that's all for this episode. And I hope that you all come back for my next. Until that time, paka.